Facial recognition technology didn't have its thinking checked to see if it was racist. Thames Valley Police Constable trial date set for battery of 16-year-old boy. Figures reveal that almost half of police deaths happen on the drive to or from work. And Greater Manchester Police rethink over COVID regulations as more than half of fines issued are left unpaid. This and more coming up. Don't forget, these reports are daily, Monday to Friday. Please remember to subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss any future uploads. And if you appreciate the work I do, please consider joining the channel Patreon for as little as just £3 per month to help me continue providing this content. Hello, ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, innies, outies, and in-betweeners. My name's Dan and welcome back to another PAP Reports. It's Thursday, the 3rd of September 2020. And although it's unlikely he will see this anytime soon, just so he knows I haven't forgotten about him, happy birthday, Kay. I'll never stop thinking about you or your brothers. I hope you have a fantastic day. I love you, kid. So, good news for residents of Arran and Chichester as District Commander Chief Inspector John Carter says he has no desire to equip police community support officers with handcuffs. At a meeting of the District Council's Overview Select Committee, Chief Inspector Carter was posed a question by Lib Dem for Brookfield Billy Blanchard Cooper. After pointing out that some security guards were issued with handcuffs, was there a reason why PCSOs were not? Asking if it was appropriate or a good use of officer time for PCSOs to have to wait around for someone with the required powers before a suspect could be arrested. Carter, who is the force's lead officer for PCSOs, told the meeting that across the whole of the UK, only British Transport Police had given their community support officers handcuffs. Now, I've got to be honest, I'm not sure if that's 100% correct, as I remember being told or reading some time ago of police force that had issued its PCSOs with handcuffs. It was in a video I made, but I cannot for the life of me remember which one it was. I simply don't have the time to go through the 400 odd videos. So take that how you want. Either Chief Inspector Carter is correct and it's only British Transport who have given cuffs, or I'm not mistaken and I did find evidence of another police force issuing handcuffs to its PCSOs. Carter said the other forces have considered it and decided not to issue PCSOs with handcuffs or other restraints because there is a real fear around the blurring of the role between the PCSO and the police officer, adding that it was rare for security guards to be issued with cuffs and that doing so brought a container load of issues, not least of which being whether an arrest was lawful. Obviously, PCSOs can make a citizen's arrest for an indictable offence that's happening or about to happen under Section 3 of the Criminal Law Act 1967. It's important to note that PCSOs not having a baton spray or handcuffs is not a legislative rule. Is not a legislative rule. It is in fact entirely down to the Chief Constable of any given force whether they give permission for PCSOs to carry any of those items. So be aware that you could see the plastic plod wielding these implements of injury and torture at any point. Carter said to train them all to the required level would take a massive amount of time, and a police survey had shown that most didn't want to carry them anyway. He added, "I'll never say never, but certainly it's not on my agenda to ask the chief officer to give PCSOs handcuffs. PCSOs themselves genuinely don't want it, and I'm not getting the sense that any chief constable has the desire to do this." So at least you can breathe easy-ish for now, knowing that those who failed the police psychological tests by passing them, or store security playing at police, will not have any other means to illegally detain you for the foreseeable future. However, remember that the police love to show how big and brave they are when a PCSO calls for them on the radio. So you will always see a bobby turn up on blues and twos as if it's an emergency shout, jump out of a car and show the plastic plod just what they're missing by actually being able to pretty much assault you and infringe your rights with perceived impunity. Facial recognition technology was not first checked to see if it was racist and sexist. Can't believe I've actually just said that. But it's true. The Metropolitan Police are said to have not bothered to assess whether live facial recognition technology discriminated on the basis of race or gender before they conducted trials with it, according to a new report by think tank Web Roots Democracy. The report suggests that during facial recognition trials between 2016 and 2019, the Met had not carried out an equality impact assessment, which is a document supposedly designed to identify the potential for discrimination against different groups. It said that this is one of the reasons why South Wales Police was ruled to be using the technology unlawfully in a recent court case. The report by Web Roots Democracy said, "Our report finds that the police have been asleep at the wheel when it comes to the impact the technology will have on communities of colour." Arik Chowdhury, director of Web Roots Democracy, said in a statement, "The fact that the Metropolitan Police did not even bother to undertake an equality impact assessment before trialling the technology is staggering. It is very likely that facial recognition will be used disproportionately against people of colour and will exacerbate racial tensions in future." The Met Police has repeatedly denied that there is a bias in the facial recognition technology that it uses. It has expressed its intention to continue using facial recognition technology despite the unlawful rulings in Wales, saying that there are different crime issues in London and that the force uses their own policy documents as well as the latest accurate algorithm. Although the Met didn't carry out an equality impact assessment before first trialling the technology, it apparently finally has done so ahead of operational deployments early this year. This document attracted attention at the time for incorrectly claiming that Biometrics Commissioner Paul Wiles said that he supported the police's use of the technology, something he later disputed. The Met and South Wales police forces use NeoFace live facial recognition technology supplied by Japanese company NEC. In its equality impact assessment, the Met says that it uses the NEC3 algorithm that the National Institute of Standards and Technologies has tested and found to be the most accurate on many measures compared to other facial recognition algorithms. In its report, the National Institute of Standards and Technology was said to have reviewed 189 such algorithms and identified marked demographic differentials in their performance across different ethnicities. A spokesperson for the Met Police said, "We are aware that the accuracy of live facial recognition technology has been subject to some debate and challenge. However, it is important to note that when using the technology, further checks and balances are always carried out before police action is taken. The final decision to engage with an individual flagged by the technology is always made by a human. We understand that the public will rightly expect the use of this technology to be rigorously scrutinised and used lawfully. The technology itself is developing all the time and work is being done to ensure the technology is as accurate as possible." A civil servant data specialist has been sacked after posting to social media that police should use live rounds against Black Lives Matter protesters. The analyst, who took a senior role in the Cabinet Office as a data architect after applying through a scheme calling for weirdos and misfits, devised by Dominic Cummings, made the statement on Twitter, where it was discovered by one of his colleagues and then reported to senior managers. 57-year-old Will O'Shea posted the comments about Black Lives Matter protests on the 5th of July at the time marches were being organised across Britain following the killing of George Floyd, responding to one person's tweet suggesting that Metropolitan Police officers had been chased out of housing estate in London by demonstrators, and another that called the police cowards. O'Shea replied, "Time to get the live rounds." Now, the reports are claiming that this is a second person from Dominic Cummings' recruitment scheme who publicly expressed sentiments viewed as racist. But I don't see the words just used as being racist. There's no mention of skin colour or ethnicity, and is a comment that could clearly have been made about any large group of people attacking police. And having said something that's viewed as being racist does not mean that it is racist. At the time, the Government Digital Services, the Cabinet Office department where O'Shea was working, had already been beset by complaints from some Black, Asian and minority ethnic staff that they had been subjected to systemic racism and bullying at work. "I can see how it was taken that way, and I am sorry for that," O'Shea said. While he regretted sending the tweet, which he said was wrong, O'Shea stressed he did not mean it seriously. He added, "I didn't say shoot blacks, and that was not what I meant or wished." O'Shea subsequently deleted his personal Twitter account, which he said was to get rid of anything that he had said. O'Shea mentioned how after his interview, he was approved to work on a number 10 project to reshape the government's use of data, which would involve breaking free of controls each department has. So basically they wanted to see how they could break governance rules, he said. And if this is true, then discrediting someone who may know that you are trying to break data governance rules would be the ideal way to stop people believing anything they have to say, wouldn't it? In a statement, a government spokesperson said, "Will O'Shea was employed by the Cabinet Office as an external contractor for the Government Digital Service on coronavirus. All standard vetting processes were carried out for a contractor role through a commercial framework." Now, as always, your views are important on these subject matters, and I'd like to know what you think. Personally, I don't think the post made was racist. Inappropriate, yeah, but in my opinion, not racist. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thames Valley Police Sergeant Matthew Myers has appeared in Luton Magistrates Court, pleading not guilty to a charge of battery following an IOPC investigation in connection with the treatment of a 16-year-old boy in Banbury Police custody. A spokesperson for the IOPC said the matter was voluntarily referred to us on January the 16th. We referred our evidence to the Crown Prosecution Service in June, who made the decision to charge Police Sergeant Matthew Myers, aged 49, with battery, contrary to Section 39 of the Criminal Justice Act 1988. Myers' trial date has been set for February the 22nd, 2021. A major review of officer safety by the National Police Chiefs Council is set to go ahead after a study revealed that more than 2 in 5 police officers killed between 2008 and 2019 died while travelling to or from work. The National Police Chief Council said the finding could not be ignored and pledged to carry out further research into any links between shift work and road accidents. The report said while the primary focus of the OSSR was to reduce the number and severity of assaults faced by our officers and staff, this finding could not be ignored. To that end, this review recommends a number of measures intended to reduce the number of road-related fatalities. These include the commissioning of research to examine the link between shift work and safe driving practices. Maybe you should simply be looking at the link between safe driving practices and being a police constable, because there's not been a report on any other job that does shift work. Funny that. Research has shown that of 92 constables who died between 2008 and 2019, 39 were killed in road accidents while commuting to or from duties. Kent Chief Constable Alan Pewsley, National Police Chief Council Lead for Officer Safety, said, "We are doing a huge review on this to understand health and safety-wise, shift patterns and any other element that may or may not contribute to it." National Vice Chair of the Police Federation of England and Wales, Chi Donald, questioned if tiredness could be a factor in the accidents. Well, it could be, but then it's not just the police who get tired. What about those who work for the NHS, firefighters, chefs even, who also work shifts and can't go home until everything's been done? Chi Donald said, "Losing colleagues under any set of circumstances is tragic, but seeing such a worryingly high number of officers losing their lives whilst commuting to or from work sets alarm bells ringing." And I'm sure it does. But maybe you should look at the driver's mental state rather than their tiredness. It must be very difficult to switch off of "I own the road and can do no wrong" mode. Chi Donald said there may be multiple factors behind the reasons why, but it is likely fatigue would have played a part in many of these cases, and officers have told us they feel their levels of fatigue poses a risk to their safety. Well, that's it, Chi. Plant the seed. Now, people who see this story will automatically think of tiredness when they see or hear about a copper being injured or dying in a traffic collision, rather than just being open to the fact that it could just as easily be the fact that they drive like twats. Now, I'd like to point out as well that all the figures of police being injured or killed prior to this revelation must be hugely inaccurate, seeing as around half of them, as in more than 2 in 5, clearly should not have been in those statistics. This review will make interesting reading when it's compiled, and I'm just wondering how many excuses they'll be able to think up. Now, a different report from the National Police Chief Council recently has proposed that more tasers should be made available to police to help during a surge of attacks on police constables. The report by the National Police Chief Council and the College of Policing says that new measures are needed because of an unacceptable rise in assaults, which has led to a 26% jump in the number of officers being injured. I wonder what the percentage increase is of complaints against the police for assault. The report also says that 15 constables have lost their lives due to a criminal act since 2008, and that every Chief Constable, including Met Commissioner Dame Cressida Dick, must now consider ways of preventing further harm. Which means that piss poor driving is more of a danger to police than the public, seeing as 92 police died in road accidents either on the way to or from work, as in not on duty, in the exact time frame. The report calls for a potential increase in the use of tasers and also calls for the introduction of enhanced provisions of body armour, safety shields, bite guards, slash and needle stick resistant gloves, self-application tourniquets. Further recommendations include the development of remotely operated vehicle immobilisation devices to reduce the risk of officers being targeted by cars and a new offence of deliberately using, threatening or attempting to use a vehicle to target police. In other words, the police want to be just like the armed forces, but without the training of the armed forces. Yeah, I can see that going down real well. Better training on how to de-escalate incidents, partly based on hostage negotiation techniques to prevent attacks taking place, was also proposed. Now, I have to say this, I certainly can get behind and fully back that proposal. One of the main things about police is their lack of communication skills when dealing with the public. Yes, they can remember all their tricks, verbal diarrhea and word salad to confuse people and trip them up into saying something they shouldn't. They remember how to agitate people into becoming annoyed with them so they can then arrest them for made-up public order offences. But there are very few who can actually de-escalate a situation without pulling out their taser or using threats themselves. It says that there should be also a hardline approach to prosecution when assaults do occur, and warns that many officers feel that such crimes are not taken seriously enough by the courts. And I think the reason officer assaults may not be taken seriously by the courts is because the judge knows it's a spurious claim. Someone might have accidentally knocked a copper whilst they were assaulting a member of the public. It may be a push during an unlawful detention. It could be as simple as accidentally stepping on their toes when they try and get in your face, and they take you in and try to teach you a lesson by arresting you for assault of emergency worker. These kind of charges against people is why courts may take the claims less seriously, and assaults on police should be taken to court should only be taken to court if they're genuine assaults, as in if the cop gets punched, spat at or kicked. The report states police officers and staff come to work every day to serve the public and bring offenders to justice, providing the offenders don't wear the same gang colours. They do not come to work to be abused, kicked, punched, spat at, attacked with a weapon or assaulted in any other way. This is not acceptable, it's not part of the job, and it must not be tolerated or condoned. But you see, Chi, we the public also don't expect to be treated with violence in situations where it's not called for. We don't expect the police to try and teach members of the public a lesson because Officer Smallpecker's feelings got hurt. And we don't expect erroneous charges being made up or erroneous suspicions being made up simply to intimidate us. This too is not acceptable, and it's not part of your job, and also must not be tolerated or condoned either. So while you're writing your report, have a think about that, because it's not just me who feels that way. An unnamed South Yorkshire Police employee has resigned after a random drugs test indicated cocaine in their system. The South Yorkshire Police employee, who was not a constable, was subject to a misconduct hearing last month after a with-cause drug test came back positive for cocaine. In a misconduct hearing document, South Yorkshire Police said a member of staff was subject to a with-cause drug test, the results of which proved positive for cocaine. No response to the allegation was provided by the staff member, and the staff member subsequently resigned whilst facing gross misconduct proceedings. The misconduct panel found that the matter amounted to gross misconduct, and the most appropriate outcome would have been to officially dismiss the employee. The staff member will be placed on the College of Policing's barred list. Recently, it was announced that some local authorities will be trialling e-scooter rentals within their cities in a bid to help reduce congestion. The same e-scooters that police are so keen to round up and confiscate from people. Now, I came to the conclusion early on that the local governments, as they do with many contracts, have taken a bit of a sweetener from the company who will be providing the e-scooter hire. After all, think of all the money the local councils will lose in revenue from parking enforcement if people are on e-scooters. They will have to make that money up somewhere, won't they? Well, with this in mind, on August the 29th, Lincolnshire Police seized 2 e-scooters from 2 youths said to have been riding in the dark, one on the pavement and one on the road, using a law from 1835. Because legislators had the forethought to write laws that reflect future travel methods. Now, it's important to note that although there is no law to prevent someone from owning an e-scooter, they are supposed to only be allowed to be ridden on private land as part of Section 72 of the Highways Act 1835, which is incorporated into Rule 145 of the Highway Code. Section 72 of the Highways Act 1835 reads as follows. If any person shall wilfully ride upon any footpath or causeway by the side of any road made or set apart for the use of accommodation of foot passengers, or shall wilfully lead or drive any horse, ass, sheep, mule, swine, or cattle or carriage of any description, or any truck or sledge upon any such footpath or causeway, or shall tether any horse, ass, mule, swine or cattle on any highway so as to suffer or permit a tethered animal to be thereon. Every person so offending in any of the cases aforesaid shall for each and every such offence forfeit and pay any sum not exceeding level 2 on a standard scale over and above the damages occasioned thereby. Now, if the legislation can be used against e-scooters, then it has to be the same against bicycles, which means it should be used against skateboards, which in turn means roller skates are out of the question too. Rule 145 of the Highways Code, however, is a little bit odd, as it says that you must not drive on or over a footpath, pavement or bridleway except to gain lawful access to property or in the case of an emergency. I mean, who ever heard of driving an e-scooter? So the legislation says if any person shall wilfully ride, and the Highways Code says you must not drive. Whether this has been done on purpose or not, I cannot say, but certainly leaves the law open to interpretation rather than being a rule of law. However, anyone caught doing so does risk £300 fine and 6 points on their driving licence if they have one. A police spokesperson said e-scooters are currently classified as personal light electric vehicles, so they are treated as motor vehicles and are subject to all the same legal requirements, MOT, tax, licensing and specific construction. Because they don't have visible rear lights or a number plate, they cannot be used on the road. You would also technically need a driving licence to operate one. So I'm going to keep my eye on the e-scooter scheme that local governments are thinking of introducing, because if they allow them to be used, it's going to be a lot harder for local plod to stop general members of the public riding theirs. And also, if people are allowed to use one without a licence, then they're facilitating a crime, and that would obviously need to be dealt with. Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham has called for a rethink on policing of coronavirus restrictions after more than half of lockdown fines have not been paid. Deputy Mayor Beverly Hughes said police are finding it impossible to enforce resented measures introduced in Greater Manchester. With the release of certain boroughs from the tighter measures, as well as reapplication of the restrictions in Bolton and Trafford, this is creating confusion for Greater Manchester Police. Which isn't exactly hard, is it? I mean, if you gave them 3 spades and told them to take their pick, or sat them in a round room and told them to sit in a corner, rather than working out the impossibility of the request, they would probably give up trying and simply start crying. Deputy Mayor Hughes told a media briefing on Wednesday, it's time that we looked at this whole issue of enforcement. Important though it has been early on in this period when there was much greater clarity on what the public was being asked to do in order to protect ourselves. The restrictions on family gatherings, if both resented by the public who see it as inconsistent with being allowed to mix with family and friends in a pub garden, and it's also virtually impossible to enforce. We've now got variation across Greater Manchester about which restrictions apply, and that makes it difficult to enforce. And we've also got confusion and complete lack of clarity by the government, oscillating in terms of what restrictions should apply where. This is bringing the whole enforcement part of the equation into disrepute. Between March and May, Greater Manchester Police dished out 305 fixed penalty notices, but only 143 of those have been paid so far. Hughes said, for enforcement to be an effective contribution to managing and minimising the spread of the virus, it's got to make sense to the public, and it's got to be feasible for the police to implement. However, police and local officials still allow protests to be held in Manchester city centre by Black Lives Matter and Extinction Rebellion, with Baroness Hughes saying that those taking part mostly kept to social distancing rather than mentioning anything about the hundreds of different households mixing in a public gathering, which is also not allowed under COVID restrictions. But hey, it's far too much trouble to try and stop a group of people with a backbone as opposed to the general white British population, who many seem to have lost their spine. An unnamed South Yorkshire Police constable was subject to a misconduct hearing this week after a complaint from a member of the public over a video he shot for evidential purposes and discussions about the arrest he had with people not connected to the police. Now, there is very, very little information available with this incident, with the force protecting him, but South Yorkshire Police said the officer accepted his actions breached policing standards and that he was given management advice, but kept his job. The force said the officer accepted that during an arrest he recorded evidential footage which he failed to maintain the integrity of. Furthermore, the officer discussed the arrest with persons outside of South Yorkshire Police without a policing purpose to do so. The officer accepted his actions were wrong and that they breached the standards of professional behaviour in relation to confidentiality, agreeing that the actions amounted to misconduct. Big thank you to channel supporters, one and all, especially channel Patreon supporters. Your support is truly appreciated. And that's all I have for you today. Please like, please share, please comment and please subscribe. Let me know your thoughts, as I know many of you will. And until next time, stay safe, look after each other, film the police and of course other officials.
Good night all.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you like the content and you'd like to help support the channel, you can do so. In the description of every video there are some links to ways that you're able to help support the channel so I can continue putting out content. If you're unable to help us in that way, hit that subscribe button up the top there. If you haven't already, become a subscriber. That is support enough. Share the videos, comment, like, it all helps. If you're looking for something else to watch, up top there is my latest video. Down the bottom there is a video that YouTube recommends for you.